Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Starting today's video strong with a story about a kind of petty genius most people only dream of. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. My 80-year-old neighbor has been conducting a 60-year-long bunny-based revenge operation. Saw a post in my city subreddit about nuisance rabbits today, and it instantly made me think of my backyard neighbor, Walter. Walter's a character. Picture Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino, but with even less tolerance for small talk. He's pushing 80, lives alone, and tends to his immaculate vegetable garden and flower beds with the focus of a bomb squad technician. His great enemy? The wild rabbits that occasionally hop the fence. About 5 years ago, I finally worked up the nerve to ask him about the small, humane live trap I'd seen near his compost bin. He just grunted, "Relocation program." I figured he meant the park down the road. I was wrong. One evening, while we were both out watering our gardens under the sunset, he offered me a beer, a shock in itself, and told me the story. When Walter was a kid in the 1950s, he was relentlessly bullied by an older kid named Tommy. The classic stuff, stolen lunch money, shoved into lockers, the works. Tommy's family owned a few acres just outside the city limits. He had everything, Walter said, sipping his beer. Big house, land, never worked for any of it, thought he owned the world. Fast forward to the 1960s, Walter buys his first house, the one he still lives in. He starts gardening, rabbits become a problem, he gets a trap. Then one day he sees Tommy, now a grown man, bragging in the local paper about building his dream country home on that family acreage. A light bulb went off. For over 60 years, Walter has been trapping nuisance rabbits in his backyard, and 2 or 3 times a month, well after dark, he loads the trap into his old truck and takes a 20-minute drive. He doesn't release them in a field, he doesn't let them go in a forest. He drives up to the fence line of Tommy's prized acreage, opens the trap, and lets the rabbits hop free onto his childhood bully's property. He always wanted a country estate, Walter muttered, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk on his face. Now he's got a country estate with a rabbit infestation. He's probably been fighting them for decades and has no idea why they won't quit. I was stunned. How long are you going to keep doing this? Walter finished his beer. As long as I can drive, and as long as Tommy's got something out there for them to eat. While Tommy was living his life, Walter's been quietly, consistently, night after night for over half a century, gifting him a permanent, self-replenishing plague of rabbits. Walter's not trying to bankrupt him or get even. He's just making damn sure Tommy has to deal with a relentless, nibbling, burrowing nuisance on the land he was so proud of, a nuisance delivered personally, one bunny at a time, by the kid he once pushed around. It's the longest, slowest, most patient act of petty revenge I've ever heard of. And honestly, I hope he's got another 10 years of trapping in him. The bully who had everything and thought he owned the world is now a steward of land that's subtly, persistently undermined by the very person he looked down on. It's a reversal of power through patience and ecology. And our second story. My boss revoked my access to crucial reports, so I complied and made her team my personal help desk. It broke her department. Many years back, I was working in an office for a company in one of their satellite sites. In general, for your day-to-day, you only needed to use one system as it did everything that you technically needed. But it didn't do everything you actually needed. Now, I was an older employee and was there before the new shiny bespoke software got rolled out, which meant I had login details for the old system, which was still the backbone of half of our head office work and fed into what we saw. This was really useful as it meant I could log in and access loads of information that we actually needed, information that some faceless exec had decided to exclude from the new system. So for the next 3 or 4 years, I would log in every couple of days and download a report or two, giving us buying reports, stocking issues, and more that I could then share with the rest of our site. It wasn't confidential information, and while we could do without it, it definitely made life easier having it. Think of it as the difference between getting a drink in the middle of the night with the lights off, but it's a damn sight easier with the lights on. Anyway, we never had an issue, and no one had complained until one day one of the department managers found out I was downloading reports from a system that she was adamant that only her team needed to use, and she contacted IT and had them revoke my access. And annoyingly, she did so without letting me know, which meant when I logged in the next time, well, I didn't and just got an error message. Locally, we had no idea what had happened, so a quick email to IT and got told that Karen had had my access blocked. So then it's a quick email to Karen to find out why, and all I got was a short and curt, "You don't need access. If you need to know something, you ask my team." I figure there's two reasons for this. One being she's a power-hungry pain in the butt that likes to control people, and two is she'd been trying to expand her team, and I guess if you make 20 satellite stores run through her, then you create the workload you need to take on 2 or 3 more people so you can give your best friend flexible working hours, allegedly. Oh, 3 reasons, actually. She really hated me after I called her out and humiliated her in front of the company directors, to which she lodged a complaint to HR demanding I be fired, only for the CEO to tell them to withdraw it as I hadn't done anything wrong after I named him as a witness to the event. So I downloaded those reports. Granted, it was only 2 or 3 reports, and only 2 or 3 times a week, which doesn't seem like a big amount, but those reports helped resolve 50-plus complaints and inquiries per day. So now I guess we have to email her team each time. I told the rest of my team to run every query through me, and I would email her team. 1, because I didn't want anyone else to get in trouble, as I knew this was going to make her explode. 2, because I could field the queries to make sure each one was unique, as we did get duplicate info requests, and if they've told me once, I didn't want to upset them by making them tell me twice. And thirdly, because I'm a jerk. I wanted her to know it was me. She managed a week. By day 3, she'd contacted my manager to complain, and by day 5, because I hadn't stopped, we still needed questions answered, she had a meeting with HR, and I got a cease and desist request asking if I could send a single email at the end of each day with all the queries in. It turns out if you email 6 people up to 50 emails a day, at some point someone misses an important invoice and a whole shipment gets delayed, or worse, gets canceled. The upside, within a couple of months, her team was restructured with different members being given regional coverage. Turns out the reason her team looked so busy is because they would count one job done by one person as being 6 jobs, 1 for each person, because they were all included in the same emails. Turns out you don't need a bigger team if you're being honest about the work they do. And secondly, the reports I downloaded, each person in her team now has to download them themselves twice a week and send them out to the stores in their region. The other stores had just decided that now they couldn't find out, there was no reason to know, and answered queries with, "I don't know," for years. So we accidentally made their services better too. The way you handled the situation was surprisingly measured. Instead of arguing with her or escalating immediately, you followed her instructions exactly and let the consequences speak for themselves. All you did was shift the workload onto the people who insisted they were the only ones who should handle it. And our last story. DNA test revealed my kids weren't mine. Now he wants $120K. About 6 years ago, I bought my oldest child one of those home DNA kits. It was meant to be a fun Christmas present, a way to explore our family tree and maybe discover some interesting history. Instead, it shattered my entire world. The results came back and showed that my 15-year-old son was not biologically mine. At first, I thought there had to be some mistake with the kit, but after getting official lab testing, the truth became undeniable. Only 2 out of my 4 children were actually mine. That discovery was like a knife in the back. I'd trusted my wife completely. We'd been married for over a decade, built a family together, and I thought we were happy. Turns out she'd been cheating for years. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you see it, when we married, we had signed a marital contract. In my faith, it's common to sign one forfeiting marital property in the case of infidelity. That contract became my ironclad protection once the truth came out. With proof of her affairs and the DNA results, divorce moved quickly. I gave my children an ultimatum because, frankly, I wanted no part of my ex-wife in my life ever again. I refused to do the co-parenting back and forth, and while I know it wasn't the healthiest approach, I let the kids choose who they wanted to live with. At the time, they were 15-year-old male, 13-year-old female, 8-year-old female, and 7-year-old male. My ex moved out of state with one of her boyfriends about 500 miles away, leaving the kids to decide. I assumed they would all stay with me. After all, they'd seen her erratic behavior, and I suspected she was abusive at times. But the results weren't what I expected. My oldest son, after learning that his real dad wasn't me, decided to live with my wife so that he could have a relationship with his biological father. That one crushed me. I'd raised him his whole life, and in one moment it was like I didn't matter. My 13-year-old daughter, whose bio dad had passed away, stayed with me without hesitation. She and I had always been close, and nothing about her love for me changed even after learning the truth. The two younger kids stayed with me as well. Fast forward 3 years. My ex-son is now 18 and preparing to go off to college. Here's where the real conflict comes in. From the day each of my kids were born, I started saving money for them. I did well in business and set aside funds meant to give them a leg up, whether for college, a house down payment, or whatever they needed. By now, my oldest's account had about $120,000 in it. When my ex and I divorced, I paid child support and alimony, though we agreed to lower amounts since her lawyers realized they had no leg to stand on. Apparently, during all these years, she was filling his head with the idea that this fund was his money waiting for him when he turned 18. The truth is, those accounts were marital property and technically belonged to me. My intent was always that they go to my children. The catch is, he hasn't been my child in 3 years. He chose to cut me out and call another man dad. When he reached out expecting me to hand over the money, I told him plainly, these funds were started for my children. Had you chosen to remain my child, the money would be yours. But you didn't, so it isn't. And I hung up. That didn't go over well. He was furious. Instead of just being upset with me, he retaliated by calling my business partners and telling them I had disowned him for being gay. The irony? I didn't even know he was gay until he weaponized it against me. My conservative values had nothing to do with this decision. It was about betrayal and abandonment. Now I'm being painted as the villain, and maybe I am, depending on your perspective. He was only 15 when all this happened. Maybe I shouldn't hold his choice against him, since he was just a kid caught in the middle of adult mistakes. But at the same time, I can't ignore the fact that for the last 3 years, he's shown no interest in being part of my life. Birthday cards went unanswered, holiday invitations ignored. I've decided that his fund will instead go to my soon-to-be stepson, who's only 5 now. He's part of my family, and I'll make sure he grows up knowing he's loved and supported. So am I the a-hole for refusing to give $120,000 to a young man who decided long ago that I wasn't his father? Or am I justified in saying those funds belong to my children, the ones who never abandoned me? First, let's lay it out straight. You didn't just discover infidelity, you had the foundation of your family blown apart. Finding out half your kids aren't biologically yours is a nuclear event. That's not something anyone just shrugs off. And the marital contract you mentioned? Honestly, it sounds like the only thing that kept you from losing everything in the divorce. And our last story. Entitled neighbor scratched her car on a rock in my yard. She says I owe her for the damage because she's always parked there. When I bought this little house on a quiet street, I thought I was finally getting a break from chaos. Turns out the chaos just wears khakis and parks like it owns the place. There's this narrow grassy strip between the curb and the sidewalk, technically my property, the kind of thing you'd think people would respect. But nope, everyone treats it like overflow parking. They'd pull their cars halfway onto the grass to keep them out of the road, and every time it rained, their tires would dig these deep ruts. It was like a monster truck rally out there. By summer, those ruts filled with stagnant water. Mosquitoes loved it. I couldn't sit outside without getting swarmed, and it smelled like a swamp that gave up on itself. So I decided to do something about it. I spent a few weekends filling in the trenches with topsoil, then packed it down, seeded it, added fertilizer, the whole 9 yards, covered it in straw, and babied that thing like it was a backyard rehab show. I basically became a one-man landscaping crew. And it worked. The grass came back lush and even. It looked great. I was proud of it. But I knew the second someone rolled their tires back onto that fresh lawn, all my work would be shot, so I took preventative measures. I hauled in some massive rocks, like had to use a dolly kind of rocks, lined them up right along the edge of the curb. Totally legal, all on my property, but very much not something you'd want to hit with a bumper. For a while, it worked. The lawn stayed intact. The street even looked nicer. And then Linda happened. I was barely out of my car one afternoon when she came marching over like I'd insulted her dog. She was pointing at the rocks like they'd attacked her personally. "Did you put those there?" she demanded. "Yeah," I said. "People were ruining the lawn." "You should have warned us," she snapped. "I scratched my car on one of those things." I just stared at her. "Why were you driving on my lawn?" "I always parked there," she huffed. "The last owner didn't care." "Well, I'm not the last owner." Her face twisted. "You need to pay for the damage to my car." "Nope," I said. "I don't owe you a cent for driving somewhere you weren't supposed to be." She folded her arms. "You could have ruined my bumper." "You did ruin your bumper," I said, "by treating someone else's yard like your driveway." That didn't go over well. She pulled out the neighborhood tradition card, told me everyone parks there, that I was being selfish, and that I was ruining the spirit of the street. I just said, "Linda, it's not a tradition. It's people destroying my property because it's easier than finding real parking." She stormed off in a huff. I didn't even go inside right away. I just stood there trying to process how someone could be that mad at me for not letting them wreck my lawn. Since then, it's been passive-aggressive central. She gives me the stink eye every time I mow. Her husband won't make eye contact, and I've heard from a few neighbors that she's been complaining, though noticeably leaving out the part where she drove onto private property and hit a rock. Meanwhile, the grass looks amazing. No ruts, no mud, no mosquito swamp. Nobody else has tried to park there either, probably because the rocks are kind of hard to miss unless you're actively ignoring the laws of physics. And if Linda ever tries again, well, let's just say granite doesn't feel guilt. Neither do I. Linda's reaction wasn't about the rocks or the bumper. It was about someone finally telling her no. For years, she operated on convenience, not consideration, and suddenly that convenience came with consequences. Her frustration's really just discomfort at being held accountable for something she got away with for too long. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.